In the previous video, we looked at the facade pattern. In this video, we're going to apply the chain of responsibility pattern to the repository API we saw in our last video. The chain of responsibility pattern allows for the decoupling of a request sender from the receiver that eventually handles the request. I say eventually because with this pattern, our request is sent down a sequential chain of potential handlers. One of the handlers is hopefully able to accept the request. If no handler can accept the request by the end of the chain, the request is not able to be handled. I should mention that this is a popular design pattern for handling events in the Cocoa framework. Let's see this in action by opening up the starter files for this video, which can be found on this video's resource page. Once you unzip the package, you'll notice that we're using the same starter files from the facade pattern video. Upon loading the application, we see the same files as before. I'll start by renaming my Connect Facade file to enum to avoid confusion. Next, we'll create just one new file named repository. We'll define a class named repository, which will have a property named nextLink, which will act as an optional placeholder for a repository type. We'll add an empty required initializer, which we'll need in a moment. We'll add a function named handle that will take a generic type T and an operation type. In this function, we'll check if our next link is nil. If it is, that means that we have reached the end of our sequence. If it isn't, that means that we have not reached the end of our sequence yet, so we'll pass our object along to the next item in the sequence. Before we finish with our repository class, let's make sure each of our three repositories inherit from the repository base class. Now that we have our repositories inheriting from the repository base class, we can complete our repository definition. Next, we'll create a class function named createChain, which will return an optional repository. I'll paste in the code for this function and break it down. Here, we are creating our sequence of repository classes. Then, we will loop over our repository classes in reverse sequence. Starting at the end of the chain, our first existing link will receive no value. Then, we'll initialize our given repo by calling its initializer. Then, we'll assign an existing link to the repo's nextLink property. In the first iteration, this existing link value will be empty, which is why we have reversed through our sequence. All future instances will get a proper nextLink value. This repository will serve as a base class for our other repos. So let's put this base class to work, starting with our user repository. I'll add an override function for our base class's handle method. I'll paste in the code and break it down. Here, we're checking to see if our generic T object can be cast into a user object. If it can, we will call our user repository manager and pass along our object in operation. If our object can't be cast, we'll call our superhandle and pass along our objects to the next item in the chain. Believe it or not, that's all that we have to do for the chain of responsibility. We'll just duplicate this logic in our other two classes, and we'll be ready to call it from main. I'll copy my handle override and paste it into file, and then change my handle function to work with file rather than user. I'll do the exact same thing for the article repository. Once done, open up main.swift. We'll delete everything except for our variables at the top. Then we'll create an if-let and assign it a value of repository.createChain. Then we'll simply call chain handle for each of our objects. Build and run. You'll see that your messages are writing out just the same as they did with the previous example. Let's take this one step further and add an incompatible type. Define a struct at the top of main.swift named vehicle and give it two properties, a make and a model. Then let's create an instance and we'll add it to our if-let statement. This time, when we build and run, we should see that we've reached the end of our chain without our object being handled. In this video, we have seen how to apply the chain of responsibility pattern to our repository API. In the next video, we'll introduce the second behavioral pattern that we're going to look at, the observer pattern.